and you should get a little message. So thanks for being here. We have a really good turnout, and we look forward to a productive session. We gave a moderator training session last May 2020, and at that time there were a lot of people who were relatively new to Zoom and in the process of making the transition to virtual forums in anticipation of the fall elections. So here we are in the spring in anticipation of spring local elections, and we thought it'd be a good time to do another update on the training. But I do want to emphasize that the focus here is going to be really on moderator training, and it's not going to be so much focused on the technicalities of conducting a Zoom forum. We did have a session on that last fall, and that is available on the LWVMA website in the webinar subfolder that you can check out if you'd like to learn the ins and outs of that aspect. We will share the recording of this with you in the next few days, and we will also post the presentation slides on the LWVMA website in the Voter Service Toolkit section. And the link will be in one of the slides that you see, and I will also type it into the chat in a few minutes. But along with the slides from this presentation, you should know that there are other materials for moderators on the LWVM website that you might find helpful, including a sample script, a handbook for moderators from 2018, and candidate grids, which you'll hear about more today. If you could all mute yourselves, that'd be really helpful. Thanks. I want to thank our presenters, Joanne Berry, Karen Price, and Sue Flykop. Joanne is a board director of LWVMA and involved in the LWVMA Voter Engagement Committee. She's a member of the Acton League, and as I'm sure you know, a very experienced moderator. Karen is a former board member of LWVMA and a member of LWV Needham, as well as a very proficient moderator. Sue is co-chair of the State Voter Engagement Committee, along with myself, and a member of the Wayland Local League, and she also has moderator experience. As for myself, I'm on the board of LWVMA and treasurer as well as co-chair with Sue of the Voter Engagement Committee. I have no moderating experience, but I would like to moderate at some point. So with that, let's get started as I pass it on to Joanne.
Thanks. Oh wait, I think I'm unmuted.
You're okay.
We can hear you.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Tanya. And it is, even though we can't all see each other, this is really great to have so many people with such a wide range of experience, from apparently not much to quite a bit. I recognize some folks on the list. So thank you all for coming, and hopefully you'll get what you came for. So I'll be covering the moderating basics. Karen will cover some of the Zoom stuff, but as Tanya said, there is a whole webinar about what to do with Zoom. And since the time we did that, most people have more experience using Zoom as well. So, but anyway, you can go to that on the site, but we will cover that a little bit, and then we'll have some time for questions and discussion at the end. And we did get quite a few questions from folks, and some of them will be incorporated in what we're doing already, you know, the materials already. So quick introduction and overview, the role of the moderator, what things to think about and ask when you're preparing with the organizers and for yourself, what are the league standards and FCC and IRS laws and regulations. So first, little thing here. As you all know, moderators provide a valuable service in helping to keep the forums fair and unbiased. The league absolutely has a reputation for running fair and unbiased forums, and the moderator is a strong part of that. Obviously, you should be politically neutral and not identified with any campaign. Now, if you are inclined to do that, you just need to be wary of, like, if you give contributions, they are online, they're easily findable. It's not to say you can't, but that you just need to be wary of where your political footprint is. And of course, you must be able to be unbiased about issues and candidates throughout the entire forum, and not be identified as being someone who's biased. And of course, to keep it going, start on time, end on time. Ending on time is like one of the big deals. I think people definitely appreciate knowing when the end is and getting out at the end. Next. So once you've been contacted to do a forum, if it's with another league, that makes it pretty easy because you'll know that it's going to be an unbiased, nonpartisan event. But you may be contacted by other organizations that the league frequently works with, or an organization in your town that may think it's a good idea to have a league moderator. So of course you want to know what are the forum's goals, and hopefully that would be to educate voters either about issues or candidates, not to give a particular point of view. Will it be nonpartisan? Have all of the candidates who are running for an office be invited? Now, of course, it could be a primary and it's only all Democrats or only all Republicans, but have they all been invited that have qualified for the ballot? Have the conditions for participation, were they outlined ahead of time, which is a league standard to decide well before you have a forum who should be, what's the qualifications to be invited to participate. If it's an issues forum, will it be balanced? Now, as we know, the league sometimes does take positions on forums that we might be asked to run, or we might decide to run for ourselves. That needs to just be made clear. But it may be one where the league has not got a strong position or a position, and be sure that more than one side, usually both, could be more, sides are being presented. Have the ground rules been spelled out, and do they seem to be fair and unbiased? We already talked about criteria. Is it open to the public? Now, if it's on Zoom, obviously, a lot of local leagues and local television stations are just posting it with links to Zoom and or on the local cable website. So that makes it super easy to be open to the public. It does not need to be open to the public during the recording, but afterwards. Or if it is, eventually we will presumably have some of our events be live. Is it open to the public then? Is it someplace where people can actually enter and participate? And does everybody understand the FCC and IRS laws and regulations, which we will get to. But you need to know that ahead of time. And if you're not comfortable with the answers that you get, feel free to not accept, at least as a league person. Okay, and then understanding what the format's going to be is an important aspect. How long? How will you have one or multiple panels? What is the setup, the arrangement of candidates? Are you going to be on a stage where they'll be facing each other, or in a row facing the audience, or a horse? What is the setup going to be? Are people going to be seated at a table? Will there be podiums for people to stand at, and are they equivalent? How many candidates do you have? How will the speaking order be determined? Often it's by the order that they appear on the ballot. It could be alphabetical order, but just so long as people know. and whether there'll be opening and closing statements, how long they'll be, what order they'll be in. Frequently, closing statements are dispensed with just to keep things moving. Depends on, how many candidates you have and everything, but it's good to know. You just need to know all of these things when you agree to be a moderator. So one of the big questions is about questions. What will the format be? Will very frequently there's a committee from the league that solicits and writes some questions to get things going. It is a league forum, so the league very frequently will have a couple of questions ready to go that are of particular interest to the league. It also gives the audience a chance to get their questions down. So the most common is to take the written questions from the audience on index cards or ahead of time, especially now with Zoom, but you can also take questions in the chat. You can set it up so that the chat goes to a couple of people, one or a couple of people, and it would be the same as taking the cards. You might take questions from the audience. That involves making sure that it's actually questions and not grandstanding or audience members making statements. Taking questions ahead of time is very popular. Putting out a notice, there'll be a forum on this date, send your questions in ahead of time. That way you can get them grouped and, edited so that the most popular topics are sure to be covered in not all the questions. And it is a good idea to have them prepared or you can just have a committee write the questions ahead, either by using information that is solicited from the public through email or just from league members, depending on how you want to do it. But just be clear about how that's going to work with the candidates ahead of time. It's required that all questions be directed at all candidates. So even if it's a question for an incumbent, why did you vote this way on a particular item, you should then give the challengers the opportunity to answer that question. If you were in office, how would you have voted? Other questions about their behavior in office and stuff are generally not appropriate. There may be follow-up questions. Sometimes it depends on your comfort level of if you want to ask a follow-up question, if there's time in the agenda, or you feel like you have enough information about the topic to follow up, particularly if they didn't specially answer the question, which happens quite often, that candidates they hear the topic and then they go off on whatever their response is related to that topic, or they don't want to answer the question and they kind of work their way around it. You may be asked by the sponsors, the sponsoring league, or other organizations to press people if they don't answer the question. If you're not comfortable doing that, just say so. And audience voters will get information about the candidate by them not responding. But if you feel like you can push them a little bit, go ahead and do that. Cross-questioning by candidates, not frequently done at league forums, though it could be, and that needs to be controlled by having your grid all organized and time limits and stuff, the same as for the regular questions. That is one of the more challenging things to manage, and it depends on the forum and the community whether or not that would be something that you want to engage in. So it is, and many of you have done these jobs, timing and question sorting. So timers, it's definitely good to have two people at a time, one watching the clock and one either holding up the cards or dinging or doing whatever the signal is. It's kind of tricky. There was a question related to something about if people won't stop talking. So just say, excuse me, your time has expired. And for most people, that will work. If it's a bell or a buzzer, that makes people stop once they hear it once. They do not want to be called out on that again. I did a forum last year. I don't know, it seems like a million years ago, but anyway, in Worcester for school committee, and it was very contentious. So the timers got in the habit of the two people they hold up the card and yell out time. So the whole audience could hear it, and people stopped going over. And so that's one method, but that was a pretty rowdy forum on its own. But usually just holding up the card is, the 15-second then time. Most people will finish up their sentence and they're good. And then the question sorting is super important for the moderator, to have good question sorters. 2 or 3 people doing that, collecting the cards, sorting through them so that you have multiple people looking at them. I think the next one is about the questions, the next slide. Yes, so obviously if you have multiple questions on the same topic, see if you can combine a question, and you might make a note. There were, a lot of questions so that the moderator can say, this is a topic of strong interest to the voters. And then obviously if you can't read it or it's just poorly worded, I don't like it when I get a card that says, the public library, discuss. I don't know what your question is. I don't know. I'm from out of town. I do not know what you want to know about the public library or the transfer station or whatever it is. It needs to be a question. Obviously, avoiding questions of a personal nature. And it is super helpful if the question sorters can say, make sure you ask these 3 questions and put a or a 1 or something on them. And then other questions, these ones, don't worry about it, but this next batch, see which number 2 or whatever. If they're just prioritized, that really is helpful. Give the moderator all of the cards, because then the audience doesn't think that you're withholding questions or censoring or anything like that. And very often you get way more questions than you could ever ask. And it's good to say that too. It's like, we have a ton of questions, but we'll only have time for, we won't have time for them all. And then to have them prioritized. And then afterwards, some people will say, my question didn't get asked, and want to see the questions. I would say, don't do that. Just stick with we didn't have time to ask all of the questions, and sometimes the questions are combined. And if people don't hear their exact wording, they think their question didn't get asked, when the question on their topic may very well have been asked. So don't share the questions afterwards with the audience. All right, next. Short questions are good. Not everyone can, even if they're very comfortable, it's hard to pay attention to a long question and then have the answer. Obviously, candidates shouldn't be too surprised by any questions they get if they're prepared at all, but it should be short and to the point, end with a question mark. It's even, like I said, even if you're used to doing that, it's a little bit nerve-wracking to sit up front and be asked a series of questions and be able to keep all that in your brain, particularly if you're not an auditory learner, which everyone obviously isn't. So short and to the point. So this is another thing that's really key for the question sorters, is to get rid of all the extra information that might be in there or extra wordiness. Next. And then when the candidates answer, try, pay attention to the timer. Sometimes it's tempting to like listen too hard to the responses and forget to pay attention to the timer. So hopefully you can pay attention enough to the answers to know what, to make sure that you're not repeating questions, and but do pay attention. And then if they start going over, let them finish up the sentence. But some people tend to speak in paragraphs, and you hopefully, if that happens, you can just say, thank you, your time is up, and most people will stop. And if they don't, if there's no auditory thing, just keep saying, thank you, your time is up, or your time has expired, please stop talking. And the person with the stop thing will be waving that around. Obviously with the bell or buzzer or some kind of thing that everyone can hear, or some places have the lights up front, like the red, yellow, green light. When that red light goes off, everyone knows that the time is up. And most people have a good idea of, how long a minute or a minute and a half is. So that is good information for the audience, for the voters, as well as the other candidates. But yeah, don't worry about cutting them off. So what moderators want organizers to know? What's the best way to communicate? Well, definitely we still need email and text and stuff, but we're not getting lost these days driving to the venues, but or getting stuck in traffic and stuff. But still, that's good to know, to have somebody's phone number so that you can text or call if you are getting stuck in traffic or something happens. It's great to have the address of the forum in every email when we get back to doing in-person ones, because I have often found myself the day of or the day before when I'm getting ready, it's like, where the heck is this thing? And scrounging through all the emails to find the original address. Zoom, as we know, pretty much you can set it to send a link the day of or the day before, but that's always good to have on hand. And be aware whether there are preliminary activities such as recognitions, or some places have the social before the forum, some have it after. So that's just good to know on gauging your time to arrive and stuff. Sometimes they'll say, oh, we have the hall all night, we can stay here. Well, you might not be wanting to stay all night. And very often 90 minutes is quite enough for the audience. 90 minutes to moderate is pretty long. So try to, limit it to what you're comfortable with, but 90 minutes is usually plenty. And once again, emphasizing the value of the questions, because while you're moderating, you cannot reliably evaluate the questions. Plus, you may not know what all the issues are in the community. And even if you do know some of them, the big ones, there might be some other sleepers out there that you hadn't heard of and they weren't expecting a question on. So it should be well written so that you can convey the voter's question reasonably well. And then once the forum begins, it's the moderator's forum. Meaning other people should not be calling out if there's time, or if they think somebody's out of order or any of that. It's the moderator's job to take care of that. And it's okay to have a note passed up. It's like, we've talked about this issue enough. Could we have a different topic? Or, that person's name is really something else than besides what you're calling them, which hopefully you've gotten that straightened out, what everyone's name is and how to pronounce their names before the start of the forum. But if some error comes up, just pass a note up to the moderator instead of calling a candidate out of order or something like that, which does occasionally happen. So, frequently asked questions. Should you wait for late arriving candidates? No. If it's possible, like if you're doing multiple panels and somebody that's on the first panel hasn't arrived, you can rearrange, have the school committee first instead of the board of select, or try to do that. If you know, sometimes people know they're not going to be there right on time and may have said that. So if they do, if that's, and there's enough people to not have an empty chair, they can just slide right in when they arrive and then take up with the next question. Don't really need to explain that. You could say ahead of time, you know, so-and-so will be arriving late, and when they do arrive, they'll just, you know, take their place and we'll continue on. So either of those things could happen. And it's, of course, obviously more helpful if you know ahead of time, but sometimes, you know, people just get there late. And so do what you need to do to start on time. If it's the only one and it would be an empty chair, meaning there's only one candidate there, then obviously you would wait. But as much as possible, don't wait. Some people like to use a gavel. Some people do not. It's up to you what you feel comfortable with. Gavel does convey a sense of power and control. But there's such a thing as using it too much, but usually a couple of raps on the podium will get people called to order fairly quickly. So it's whatever you're comfortable with. So the empty chair. So that's if there's only one candidate. So if you had three candidates running and one of them didn't attend, you still got two. You can do that. If there's only one candidate available or present, you may not run the forum if it's contested, because this gives that candidate who is present a thing of value, time on air, or time on air that the other person didn't get. Now, we know that sometimes candidates refuse to participate for this very reason. It's annoying and frustrating, but there is nothing except for encouraging them, writing letters to wherever letters get published these days and trying to encourage them to participate, but sometimes they just won't. And you really can't do anything about that because the FCC and the league's nonprofit status could be compromised by allowing one candidate to appear without the others. Obviously, if it's uncontested election, there's only one candidate, they can appear. Any recording made of a forum must be broadcast in entirety. Now, it used to be that we would say you cannot clip from video when it was a physical medium, and now everything's digital. So mainly what leagues are saying is you can link to our recording either on the league website or on the local cable website or YouTube channel. But taking clips is not allowed. And what can you do if they do? Depends. Mostly they don't. They could say, my part is from minute 15 to minute 18. That might be where you want to watch. But they're not supposed to be manipulating the video. Now, they can take their own video. There really isn't a lot you can do about that with everyone having cell phones that can record. When that first started being a thing, league people were getting a little upset, but then you get involved in First Amendment questions, and I don't think the league wants to be in the position of being challenged on First Amendment rights of audience or candidate. So you definitely want to have a script. There is a sample script on the LWVMA website, which has, you can cut and paste it to suit your needs. It could be somebody from the hosting league will be doing the introduction, and or maybe you will, talking about, welcome, nonpartisan, here are the rules and format, which the moderator should explain the rules and format for the audience benefit as well as the candidates. They should know, the candidates, but the audience should also know how the questions will be asked, what are the response times, where the questions orders and timers are, a reminder to be civil, and a reminder to the audience to hold applause until the end. Now, if they do at some point spontaneously applaud, you could just say, I just would want to remind you to hold your applause until the end. It cuts into the time for questions, and we want to have as much time as possible. Explain what the agenda is, the timing of the agenda. Have your timed agenda and your candidate question grid. Now, you can either incorporate it into the script, some people like to do that, or have a separate page, whatever you like. And then there's question, how much information about candidates or issues do you want? Now that's whatever makes you feel comfortable. It's good to know if candidates have been unruly in recent other forums, either league forums or ones that have happened around town or in the district. But very often I have found that candidates come to a league event and expect to be civil. It's just, they don't often misbehave in my experience. And then once you warn them, they stop for the most part. It's different than, maybe the town Democrats or the town Republicans or some other group in the area that's run them. And I don't know what they do, but I have heard that they have gotten unruly in different places. But if you set the standard up front, usually people will conform. That's just, though there's a bunch of grids in the materials on the LWVMA website. This is just a couple of samples of what it could look like. And you can color code them if that helps you, or use colored pens or whatever. They're perfectly editable. So when you arrive, hopefully you'll get there in enough time to check out the room, the podium, the sound, check in with the event coordinator in case you need to know about any of the candidates who might be misbehaving lately, or if there's anybody who couldn't come at the last minute, or any other concerns that might be popping up. Usually the TV people will make sure that you check in with them. Usually they'll find you, but just make sure either way that you figure out if it's a podium mic, if it's a clip-on mic, how that all works. Make sure you have water. Usually they'll do it, but if you bring your own, then you're all set. If you might want to make sure you have a cough drop too. And of course, hit the restroom and you should be good to go. Finally, if you do make a mistake, mispronounce somebody's name, skip somebody, whatever, just correct it, apologize, move on. Nobody will remember. I usually make at least one mistake per forum. If you feel comfortable using humor, go ahead and do that to lighten the mood if that seems to be appropriate. However, if you've been told humor is not your best game, don't do it. Or if it just doesn't feel right, just don't. Just do what works for you, whatever you feel comfortable with. Try to have everything that you need in front of you in writing, even if you don't look at it, but you could get a brain cramp somewhere in the middle and forget a key thing. Just take a pause, take a breath, find your place, move on. No. And like I said, people didn't come there to see the moderator, they came to see the candidates. So your job is to just keep things moving along. And if you do make a mistake or have a little brain cramp, take a breath, correct it, move on. It's all good. I think, yes. So this, I don't know how many people have heard of this, the power pose, either standing hands on hips like the girl on Wall Street or like that. It's a known technique. This woman who's in the photo, her name is, I think it's Amy Cuddy. There's the link to her TED Talk about doing this. It does release hormones that help increase your confidence. So what one of the recommendations is, if you're going to a job interview or some stressful situation, just go in the restroom for a few minutes and stand in the power pose for a minute or two, and you will feel powerful. So I always like ending off with that. And I think that's it. I sort of have been feel like I've been talking into the void. So we will be doing questions shortly, but I think Karen has some stuff, just some quick stuff about Zoom.
Yes, I'm getting ready. All right, I'm spotlighting me and unspotlighting. Just to finish up, Joanne talked about some of the materials. These are screenshots from the LWVMA website, and under toolkits for members, voter service toolkit, there's information for moderators, which includes sample script, moderator handbook, and I think 6 candidate grids for several possible, numbers of candidates. Sometimes the coordinator will provide you a grid, but you should find out. These are also on there. These are actually for the coordinators at the local league, but they can be useful for moderators as well. It is here. Using Zoom for candidate forums training. It's here as well as under webinars. So there's this was done in the fall. Tips for avoiding Zoom bombing. You can see what they are. Different things that have been put together from LWVUS and LWVMA. And then there's even more tools for debates and forums. So these are, as I said, mostly for the coordinators from the local leagues. So I'm going to talk about Zoom considerations. And during the primary and general election, we happen to have had quite a few candidates. And so I learned a lot. Then we did 5 forums. And that's not to say that I know everything by any means. So here's that. So if you want to know more about using Zoom for candidate forums, the webinar that actually Joanne and I did in September is on the website, and you can watch that, and that goes into more detail if you're the coordinator. This forum is if you're the moderator. So usually a Zoom forum would have this staff. I'm just putting this up so when I talk about these different things, you know who they are. The host, that's a Zoom definition. The host is the person who logs into Zoom and starts the meeting. The co-host is assigned by the host and does almost everything that a host can do. It's good to have a co-host in case you lose the host to a Wi-Fi interruption or something. The moderator, you, who does the question asking. The timekeeper, which could also be a co-host. And the question sorter, if you're using live questioning on the, whoops. So the local league coordinator makes all the arrangements theoretically, but the moderator should ensure that your own setup at home and it's and your appearance. Ask questions of the local league event coordinator to ensure a successful event and avoid surprises. And you can also help the local league if they've never done a Zoom candidate event and you have, then you can be a valuable resource. It's good to know. So this is what you should consider or ask prior to the event. Is it going to be on the Zoom meeting platform or on the Zoom webinar platform? And the basic difference is in Zoom meeting, there's only, it's like this is a Zoom meeting. There's only one kind of participant, plus the host and co-host. Whereas in a Zoom webinar, there's two kinds, the panelists and the attendees. You've all been on a webinar. The attendees are there, but they're in the background and they don't speak and you don't hear from them, but they're watching. And the panelists would be the host, the co-host, the candidates, the moderator, the timekeeper, and the question sorter. The attendees, they watch the forum live. They can ask questions via the Q&A box. And they may be a panelist. They may be made a panelist to ask a question with video plus or minus audio, but that usually takes time, and a lot of times it doesn't work. You've all probably seen that too. My sense is that most people are doing their candidate forums with Zoom meeting, whereas Needham has been, my league has been doing them with Zoom webinar because we like the live participatory nature of it. So a few questions to ask beyond what Joanne spoke about, specific to Zoom. Will the event be open to attendees from the public? So do you want people from the public to actually join the Zoom, be part of it, ask questions? Now, I would only recommend you do that if you have Zoom webinar. I wouldn't recommend that with Zoom meeting. There's too many things that can go wrong. As you know, anybody can unmute and start talking at any time. And that's just a little bit too much. And will they ask questions? Will the questions be screened? And how will it, important on Zoom, how will I get the questions from the audience? So again, I only recommend that for Zoom webinar format, and just make sure there is someone to feed you the questions. The local coordinator can figure out how that works, but you need to be comfortable with it. I recommend using the Q&A box, but some people use chat. Will the cable TV be recording and or streaming the event live? What is the role of the TV station? Why do you want to know that? You may be used to a certain cable station where the equipment is, but the equipment and software is widely different among the various towns. And it's useful to know who is responsible for the technical aspects of Zoom. Sometimes the cable station owns the Zoom, sets up the thing, does all the logistics behind the scenes. But sometimes it's the local league, it's a local league person doing that. It's just good to know. When will there be a Zoom rehearsal with the candidates and Zoom staff prior to the event? If there's one piece of advice you take from us tonight, it's that you should really have a rehearsal. So a rehearsal with the moderator, the candidates, the Zoom host, the timekeeper, and the question sorter, if you're doing that, is critical. And you might consider making it a condition of moderating. If the local league says, oh no, we don't do that, then you might consider saying, well, I'm not comfortable with that. It's up to you. Maybe you are. It can be as short as I should say, it can be as short as 20 minutes and a few days before the real event. I did a candidate event for the primary that had 11 candidates. They all made it to the rehearsal. They, I think, were very appreciative that we had a rehearsal. So everybody gets on, you go through the muting and unmuting, it gives you an opportunity to meet the candidates, put the names with the faces, explain how you will run the Q&A. The moderator is an important person during the rehearsal. You can read the script, check your appearance, check the timing clocks, or however you do the timing, chatting, ground rules. It's really important. In fact, many cable stations insist that you do it. if they're doing the technical aspects. Will I be provided a script and when? You should expect to receive a script and to receive it in time to make comments and changes. And sample scripts can be found on the website, as we said. Has the local league taken steps to avoid Zoom bombing? It's not an issue if you're using Zoom webinar, and it's not much of an issue if you're only allowing the staff on, you're not allowing anybody else. But if it's a Zoom meeting, very important, do not put the link out on your website and say, you know, join this webinar. I mean, join this forum. And do not allow participants to screen share. That's a setting. You can have only the host do the screen sharing. I mean, you're probably not going to share the screen anyway, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't prevent others from screen sharing. Will I be co-moderating? Sometimes a local league is co-hosting the event and they want somebody to moderate with you. That's kind of a pain on Zoom. It works okay on a live forum. So I would suggest that you encourage the co-host to do something else besides moderating, like give the introduction or the closing, if you can. And then tips for your appearance. Be mindful of your space in your frame. What can be seen behind you? So you see here, I have a big sign. Now, not everybody has a big sign like that. It could be a small sign over my shoulder. That's a sign on an easel. I personally don't recommend the Zoom backgrounds because unless you've practiced with them, you often, like, your arms get lost and your face gets compressed. Choose a good distance from the camera. Don't move in and out. And I know that I'm doing this right now. Beware of the office chair that swivels. I'm one of these, and this is terrible for a moderator or a candidate to be doing this. Lighting, it's best to have a light source behind your computer shining toward your face. That can be hard to do, but just really avoid backlight, especially from a window. If it's a nighttime event, that's not an issue, but a lot of times we are doing these during the day now. So here's some of the pitfalls of sitting too close and having poor lighting, and not being aware of your position within the frame. You can see yourself, so you might as well get it right. Prior to and at the event, ensure that you have adequate bandwidth in your home from the location you will be in. Distance from your Wi-Fi source matters. Keep your eyes forward when reading a script. I put it right up against the laptop screen to the right of the camera, so you can see the green or white light of the camera. Don't cover that. Test your sound. Turn off any sound producing items. During the event, mute when you're not asking questions. Remember to unmute. Now this is awkward, and if you can guarantee that your environment is going to be totally quiet, I think it's okay for the moderator not to mute and unmute, since the moderator does so much talking. But candidates need to mute and unmute, and they often need to be reminded to unmute. Just make sure that whether it's you or the host or the co-host or the timekeeper, one person should be assigned the role of reminding people to unmute. And usually you only have to remind them 2 or 3 times at the beginning. Only the host or co-host can mute, and only the participant can unmute. So if you're a host or a co-host, you can mute somebody else, but you can't unmute them. That's why you have to get on there and say, Mr. So-and-so, please unmute. Ms. So-and-so, you are on mute. They also get a big message on the screen, but they don't always see it, actually. Decide before you start how the local league coordinator will communicate with you. Joanne mentioned passing notes. That is one of the things I really miss not being, able to do on Zoom. You can chat with the chat box, but you really have to be careful that you're only chatting to the moderator and not to everyone or all the panelists or something like that. You can text on the phone, but you may have turned the sound off, because I just told you before, turn off sound producing devices. So there again, you might not see or hear the text. So I would, many times there's something as a coordinator, there's something going on with the moderator, and you just want to tell her, don't do this or and you would just pass a note if it was a live forum. I really missed the passing of the notes and the being able to make body language. I did want to mention the moderator's not in charge of timekeeping, but certainly has to have good timekeeping in order to do her job. So if you're not familiar with the League of Women Voter countdown clocks, we have these clocks that are available for 30, 60, 90, and 120 seconds. You can download the files from this. This is actually a Google Drive. And there's a document that gives instructions on how to use them. There should be a person other than the moderator or host as a timekeeper. Under no circumstances let the local league ask you to be the timekeeper as well. And in order to do these clocks, candidates and the moderator must set their screens on gallery view in order to see the clock. So I'm going to just show you how that clock works, because not everybody has seen them in action. So this is from a primary forum. And if you see the upper left-hand corner, as you look at it, it says timekeeper. And all of the candidates can see this. So let's.
Thank you. And Mr. Walsh, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Michael Walsh, and I'm running for the Register of Probate, obviously, but I am a practicing trial attorney for the last 33 years, and I am a 3-term selectman here in Westwood. Both positions have given me enough experience to be able to handle this job quite easily. I can tell you that I've been representing individuals and families, not only in the probate court, but in all courts across the United States, across Massachusetts. And I am licensed in the federal court as well. I have done this for 33 years. My clients will tell you I should be the next Register of Probate.
Thank you.
Unfortunately for him, he is not the next Register of Probate for Norfolk County. I think he came in second. Also, I could recommend that you get your own free Zoom meeting account. And for free, you get an account, you have an unlimited number of meetings. You have an unlimited time for less than 3 participants, which is the same as 2. You can have group meetings with 3 or more, but they're capped at 40 minutes and the meetings cannot be recorded. But it's a good introduction to Zoom. You can, on your own, you can see how you appear, you can test your backgrounds and things like that. You can invite one other person and or any number actually, just to practice a little bit. And as I said before, practice makes perfect. Practice your Zoom settings and actions set up. If in your practice, I know that the moderator is not in charge of the practice, but if you set it up as a real forum and ask LWV members, this is a practice without the candidates, where you ask league members to sit in as candidates and moderator with a real timekeeper, host, question sorter. You can record the session if it's not a free Zoom account. And practice with the moderator, practice with the candidates, and review everything again 20 to 30 minutes before you start. Practice, practice, practice. Makes a huge difference. Okay, now we're going to go to questions and discussion. And there's everybody. I'm going to spotlight Sue, who's going to lead us through this. And go ahead, Sue.
Okay,
I can
great.
find this
Well,
one.
welcome everybody. It is amazing to see almost 50 of you here all together. As Joanne mentioned, we know that some of you are very experienced moderators, and we'd love to get your participation in the discussion. It might be a little difficult with so many people. We have a list of questions that we received ahead of time that I'd like to go through. And those of you who have questions, maybe you can add them in the group chat, and hopefully we can get to them. We'd like to end our meeting around 6. So if it's not possible to get to all of your questions, you can always email any of us who are here, Joanne, Karen, Tanya, or myself, and we would be happy to, answer your questions. I'm hoping you're not hearing my dog whining. This is something that is probably something not to do. My dog is right next to me, so I apologize. So we had a list of questions, and I've grouped them into several sort of large buckets. And the first one is about forum structure and rules. The first question is asking us to clarify the role of moderator versus host. So I'm not sure if this question applies to Zoom. I know Karen has just spent some time going over the difference for Zoom roles. In general, for, I don't want to say in-person forums, but in general, when we're not worried about Zoom, say, the host is often a person from the sponsoring league, the person who wants, who's organizing the event. Sometimes it's a president or a voter service chair or someone, and they will often open the forum, offering a greeting, thanking people, that sort of thing. And then you come in as the moderator and ask your questions. There are some times where the hosting league is happy to have you do everything from soup to nuts, and they provide a script for it. So that's something to check out, determine exactly what they want you to do and where that line is between the host and the moderator. Another question here is asking about changes between the guidelines, if they've changed over the years, especially with Zoom or holding them virtually. And as Joanne mentioned, they really haven't changed at all. Zoom hasn't really changed anything. We still have the whole idea of an empty chair debate. You still don't want to have a debate with just one candidate or a forum with just one candidate. And our roles as moderators really haven't changed. I'd also urge you to be sensitive to whatever is happening in the community. Sometimes there's a lot more tension about issues, and so you want to stay as neutral as possible. Another question is, do you find local league formatted questions to be a good idea? Joanne talked about all the different ways that questions can be formulated and created. So I think it is dependent on the questions themselves and who arrives at them. You as moderator should feel free to look through them ahead of time and make suggestions or improvements. I know when I've run forums, I actually learned a lot from our moderators about shortening questions, making them more direct. The more direct the answer, the question, usually the more direct the response. We had one very specific question about holding candidate events for our local for a local election in May, with lots of candidates, and questions about a charter committee that's on a charter commission. So I know Karen mentioned moderating a debate with, I think it was 10 or 11 candidates. So I was hoping she would weigh in on this, but I did want to just start out by saying we also don't want to try and do too much sometimes. This question mentions 6 to 10 questions for more than 10 candidates, which is a very long event. We have other vehicles, right? We have candidates guides. You could do a candidating event, some sort of modified event where, well, I guess we can't do it now in person, but maybe there's a way to do it through these Zoom rooms. And I just wanted to put that out there that it's maybe time to really push a little creativity, or you can also divide up candidates so that you don't have all 10 plus candidates at once, and you can really get into some of the deep questions. But I wanted to throw it out to Karen and Joanne if they had any ideas about that, doing some very large forums with a lot of candidates.
One thing I would suggest is cut down on your time. You know, you don't need to give people an opening statement of 3 minutes or even 2 minutes. You can cut that down to 30 seconds. The one I just showed you was 30 seconds because that was an 11. There were only 5 people on the screen, but there were 11 candidates because it was 3 offices. And I'm a big fan of 1 minute answers, although I know some people think that that's not enough. And I actually think Zoom, you know, in gallery view is pretty good for a lot of candidates. I think it works pretty well. Joanne?
And I would suggest, just as in a live forum, that you don't need to ask every candidate every question. So one of the grids that has, I think, 10 on it is divided so that they get equal time, but you're not asking everyone all the same questions. You can decide that you're going to ask everybody the same topic, but word the question, you know, have a slightly different question, because it gets really boring for the audience. And a lot of times there's not a lot of distance between the candidates. So they'll say, I agree with my fellow candidate, blah, blah, blah. And then they continue to burn up the time. So that's a way to, you know, make it more interesting and kind of keep it moving so that it doesn't bog down and get boring, either in real life or on Zoom.
Great, thank you. We also have a question about how to prepare yourself in terms of your knowledge of the issues, and you know, and about the town that you're moderating in. So I know from personal experience that I walk in, I am a complete blank slate. I have no preconceived notions. I've had no interactions with some of the people there, so I don't have any opinions about them. And sometimes I think people find that refreshing, because you're not judging anybody, or there's nothing about your attitude that you know, sort of signals to people that one person might be more credible than another. You are treating everyone the same, respectfully, and you come in as a blank slate. In general, we don't usually moderate for our own town. I think there are probably emergency circumstances. I know I used to live in Newton, that if we had, say, a ward counselor and we lost our moderator at the last minute, it is possible to pull someone from a different ward who couldn't vote for those candidates to appear, but we tried to avoid any of that. I didn't know if Karen or Joanne had anything more to add about, you know, preparing your, there goes my dog again, sorry, about preparing your yourself for whatever is happening in the community that you're going to moderate.
I agree with you. I pretty much, though, if you return year after year, as I do to many of the local leagues, you get to know what some of the issues are, because small town politics moves slowly. But and it's good to know if a particular candidate has been unruly recently, or might be prone to having some kind of outburst during the forum. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but it's good. That is kind of like last minute information that you can learn there at the forum.
I have gone online and read about issues if I've been warned about them by the local league, but rarely.
Great, thank you. There's also, actually, we had a question in here about how does a league register participants? I'm not sure if that means more of a technical thing for Zoom. It's talking about local cable station and the webinar they'll do a webinar and we'll contact the candidates. How does the league register participants? Is this on the LWVMA website? Karen, do you have anything that you can add about that?
Registering for a Zoom meeting or webinar, you can do that through a link. You set it up in Zoom. Now, if your cable station is doing the Zoom setup, they have to do it for you and give you the link. The webinar format is the one that automatically will send a reminder and things like that. You have to be sure to set it up that way. And the meeting format, you can have a registration and it does automatically send one email, but you have to kind of manually get it to send a reminder.
Great, thank
I'm
you.
not really sure, the registration is set up in Zoom by whoever has the Zoom account.
So there might be a good reason to go and review the presentation that we did in September about Zoom.
Yeah.
We did have a few questions that I think we've answered in our presentation about empty chair rules, about using the grids. So if you have more specific questions, you should feel free to email us and we'd be happy to answer them. Now, we had several questions about handling unruly participants or people going off topic. And I'm sure there are a lot of people here who might have some experience that they'd like to share. So I'm hoping if you'd like to speak, if you can just put your name in the chat, then we can open it up. But I'm just worried about 50 people talking all at the same time. I can speak from my own experience. I had a very unruly participant. And the main thing is to keep your cool. You want to be respectful at all times. You are representing the league, the hosting league, and just the league in general. And I know I started out, I did not want to highlight or target any person in particular. So I started out by saying, just as a reminder, everyone has 2 minutes. We're going to ask that everyone be respectful of each other. And I'm sure it was obviously clear who I was aiming my comments at, but I didn't want to target anyone out. And it kept escalating the whole evening until I got to the point where I would say, Mr. So-and-so, it's really important that you be respectful. I'm going to remind you. And I was a little bit of a broken record, I admit. I made my point to the audience that there were certain rules that everyone had agreed to follow. In fact, I mentioned that everyone had agreed to a certain time and to be respectful. And there was only so much you could do. I know as a person who's organized forums, I've had candidates go really long. In fact, Karen's moderated some of those for Governor's Council. And you just do what you can. You maybe talk over the person after a certain time. Sometimes if it extends, like with this unruly person, I would give the other candidate a little bit extra time because he was being talked over or the unruly person was taking more time. And my goal was to be as fair as possible and to make sure that the opponent was able to get his position out there to everybody. I think you do what you can, but just remember that you are the league to the people who are watching. And so we need to keep to a certain standard like that.
In the chat box, somebody wrote, would the occasion of an unruly candidate be a time to redirect the candidate to the question? I guess ask the question again as a way to work. I think that's a suggestion.
Yeah.
It could, I'll say it could work, but when candidates don't answer the question, that gives the voters information as well. And it's, unless you've been asked specifically to make sure they answer the question, because there could be a particular issue in town that's the deciding issue. And if a candidate, and you wouldn't necessarily know that, and if a candidate continues to refuse to answer the question, then that gives voters information. And if you say, just say, could you please respond to the question, and they still don't, then you don't need to become a broken record over it.
I do think there is, don't forget there's at least one other candidate who's behaving appropriately. And, they might not have anything more to say. So I worry about giving these people who are unruly extra time and more attention, and just because their behavior is so bad. So I think, you need to make a snap judgment sometimes about what you're going to do. And if it's just one time and one question, I wouldn't worry so much. But if it continues for 45 minutes, then, there is an issue of fairness involved.
Yeah, and that there's also something in the chat recommending something like that. But if somebody seems to be treated unfairly, you can give them some extra time.
Yeah, especially when there's a
an
personal attack.
important
You want to give people a chance to rebut that.
important question here, I think that comes up. Would it be acceptable to mute an unruly candidate after several requests? So there's one consideration there is that if you're the moderator and you're not given, you're not named as a co-host in Zoom, you cannot mute. You don't have that power. So that's something to consider. But the coordinator or the person, the host or the co-host can mute. It's really not recommended, but if things get out of hand, that's one big advantage of Zoom.
Or you could just say, since you've gone over several times, I'm going to ask the person with the control of the mute to please stop, mute you after the time limit.
Well, and there has to be some communication. You as a moderator, that's why it's as Karen mentioned, or Joanne mentioned, it's a good idea to have someone's phone number so you can be texting on your phone while you're moderating to try and figure out how to handle the situation.
And as is pointed out in the chat, they can just unmute themselves.
Yeah, they can, but by the time I think it's pretty effective to mute them if they're talking and nothing's coming out. And if they're really hot, they're not going to notice.
I'll go back to what Jen and Joanna mentioned, that the league's known for putting on respectful, informative debates. And, I think people see behavior like that and they choose the candidate that's right for them. They will have the information they need as to who to choose, which is really the ultimate goal, right? Is to make sure the voters are educated enough to make the choice that's appropriate for them. So I do worry about redirecting, because also we might be directing or sort of forcing a question that really isn't that important in the community, because we might not be as knowledgeable. So again, you have to do what you feel comfortable with. And if you're concerned at all about this, or if you're told ahead of time there is an unruly candidate, you might want to talk with the local league about how they would prefer to handle it, because you're leaving. You're going home, and that's that. And the other league might have to face some fallout if there's a real issue. So just something to think about.
So there's a couple of things here that have to do with Zoom. One person says, instead of muting, only turn on their microphone when it's time for the candidate to answer. You cannot turn on their microphone. Only the participant can turn on their own microphone. It's kind of a privacy thing. You can turn it off, but you can't turn it back on. You can ping them and ask them to turn it back on. There's a setting where you can just say, ask them to turn it on, and they see it on their screen, but a lot of times they don't see it. Susan Clapham had a point that one candidate kept going overtime, and it turned out she couldn't see the clock. I mean, maybe she was on a phone or an iPad. And Susan also mentioned earlier that it's important to know what devices each candidate has so you know that. But they really shouldn't use a phone if they can help it. And about seeing the clock, that's one of the main things you do in a rehearsal, is make sure they see the clock. And when you get on 10 minutes before, make sure they can see the clock, run the clock, or whatever timekeeping device you're using.
That's great. There's another question here about having a final question that's a yes or no, that requires a yes or no answer. And the candidates are prepared for it when they come to the forum. How do you feel about that? Karen and Joanne.
Sure. So I don't know about a final question, but sometimes when you have large fields of candidates, it can help break it up a little bit to include some quick yes/no questions in the middle and do kind of like a lightning round. It's particularly if there are ballot questions, do you support the ballot questions? Yes, no. And then there could be follow-up later about their reasoning behind that, but that gives the audience a quick snapshot or some other quick questions. But the ballot questions are a good one to do that way, whether or not people support or oppose them.
It's a little bit harder to do a lightning round in Zoom, just because of the muting and unmuting. But yeah, we wanted to do that when we had the 11-person forum, which Joanne moderated. And we tried to, we decided it was just, it was also early days with using Zoom, and we just figured people would be fumbling with the mute and the unmute and talking on top of each other and stuff like that.
This is another idea for the person who emailed a question about having a very large group of candidates and how to do it over Zoom. So maybe it's another possibility, another option. We did also get a question about how a beginner can get experience, which is something that we've talked about offline, how to help people feel more comfortable moderating if they haven't done it before, or if they've only done one or two. So I want to put that out there. We're open to any suggestions that you might have. We were thinking of some sort of maybe a buddy system or shadowing someone who's more experienced. But we're open to all types of ideas on how to help people. So if you want to add that to the chat or email us afterwards, that would be great as they come up. Here's one, a new question. Among the resources available, are recorded forums available to view to see how Zoom events work? I would love to shadow, great. So we'll think about that. So there is, so this gets to the Zoom forum that we had in September, that there's a lot of information and we have our own experts right here. So I don't know if you want to address that, Karen.
I think what she's talking about is like somebody in Franklin County watching a Needham forum to see how it was done or vice versa. And there's not a, I think we did, I don't actually, maybe Tanya knows. I think in Vote 411, and I don't know if that's still active, you could watch, you could find the links to forums, I think, for the primary, the state primary and general elections. But the local leagues, they have them on. So we're hearing the 5th Congressional District Forum in October was recorded and put online. Needham has a whole bunch online. I don't think there's a central repository.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Vote 411. I can look into it and let people know. I don't know off the top of my head if there are forums there still even.
Yeah.
So for people to find out about upcoming forums to watch, is it just randomly sort of checking local leagues? I know there have been a few on the league leaders list. I think there were some people asking for moderators. So clearly in the spring, some towns are having elections, so there will be things coming up. Here's Sudbury.
Apparently I'm a star on Sudbury TV. I have moderated in Sudbury quite a lot. And we did one just this week in Wellesley, which is that linked on Wellesley Cable or the Wellesley League website or someplace?
Yes, it's on our Wellesley website, and it's also on the local media station, and it's on our Facebook page too. So
yeah, so Wellesley's already had theirs as an earlier election compared to many towns.
There's a comment about maybe starting out as a timekeeper as a way to start getting involved in shadowing. I will say, I was a timekeeper once, and you have to say totally focused on the time. It was hard to pay attention to the forum if I wanted to do a good job of it. I don't know how other people feel about that. But I have been a question sorter. I've done sort of all the different roles, and that's been helpful too. how does someone get matched with a moderating opportunity? This is something we need to put our heads together and figure out how to do, how to, connect people to do a shadowing program. Haven't worked on that yet, so that's to come. And someone else mentioned that a lot of local cable stations will post on YouTube, so you might, pick a community and see if they have forums online that you can see. Okay, I think we've tried to answer most of the questions. There were one or two about Zoom again. Checking out the Zoom forum, and then if your questions still aren't answered, you should definitely email one of us. So this Tanya, myself, we're voter service co-chairs for the State League, and then there's Karen and Joanne. And you can also contact them as well if there's something that you'd like to ask them directly.
And I see we do have just a request to clarify on the empty chair rule. So that is, it's an FCC and IRS regulation. Because the league is a nonprofit organization, we do have the 501c3 and 501c4, which allows for partisan activities at the state level, but most local leagues are pretty much 501c3s. Plus, the league is identified in the public as a nonprofit, particularly when we're doing voter service activities. So it's a combination of the actual regulations where the league could lose its nonprofit status and its perception in the public as a nonpartisan, unbiased organization that sponsors these forums, which is why we don't do the empty chair. I hope that cleared that up.
Okay.
And then there's the question about what happens when the internet goes out during a forum.
Stuff of nightmares.
Yes, there's no pat answer to that. I'd love to hear what other people say. I mean, you just really hope that it doesn't happen, for one thing. But
and that hopefully they can get back in quickly.
Yeah, if it's, and then again, with the rehearsal, that is the time to say, to actually feel these things out. Now it can happen, not happen in the rehearsal and happen in the real thing. But, ideally the rehearsal, they're sitting in the spot they're going to be sitting in. That doesn't always work out. But if it's the moderator, I think the local league coordinator should step in and, or even the question sort. On these Zoom forums, you're not taking that many questions from the audience. So more than the moderator have the questions, I'm sure. So the local league host or co-host, somebody should be assigned the role of, if the moderator disappears, picking up the ball and try to keep things rolling. Much harder is if one of the candidates disappears. And you kind of have to play it by ear, how long are they gone? Can you give them more time? If they totally disappear, and it becomes a de facto empty chair, I think you've got to maybe reschedule or something like that. Joanne, I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, you definitely would have to stop in the moment. And if it's a record, if it's just the candidates and the league people, then hopefully, yes, you can just take up where you left off quickly, or within a few days. But if it's a live event, you definitely have to stop that portion anyway. And if you've got an additional, more panels, then hopefully by the time you get to the end, the person can get back on, or somebody's texting or phoning with them to find out what, if they're having trouble. So you just got to do the best you can in the moment, I guess.
Yeah, it's really the local league coordinator's call, I think, what to do. The moderator just has to go with the flow.
And there's a couple of more good bits of information in the chat.
There's, first there's a comment that maybe if you're interested in helping a new moderator, maybe you can put out, and you're an experienced moderator, you can put out a call I'm not sure, maybe to the legal leaders list, or maybe we will develop something that will allow people to post maybe, so that people can, new moderators can partner with somebody. And then we have from Marlene O'Brien, we have a bunch of additional recommendations. You receive written info in advance from organizers, hopefully, and that hasn't always worked for me. I've had to provide some of it, but presumably you'll receive written info, and it's always helpful to ask if there is anything else at all that you think I should know before we get started. So there may be points that people don't want to put in writing. That's absolutely true. Maybe it's a problem with a candidate or a worry that they have. So it would be good actually to talk to people face to face or by phone. At the end, be sure to invite all audience members to join and support the league, of course, and give the website. On the following day or so, reach out to the candidates via email or mail to thank them. And if you'd like, invite them to join or donate to the league. That would be something that the host league should definitely do.
Yeah, that's not for the moderator.
Yeah, you should all try and get your own elected officials to be a member. But as the moderator, you've done your job once you're out. But definitely to the organizers, that's good advice. Might be a good idea to have a group text already set up with hosts, moderators, timekeepers, panelists, so that they could text in real time. Absolutely. Just to handle any emergencies or any questions that might come up, or a dog that's whining and you're not sure how you should handle it. So these are all good pieces of advice. So any last words from Tanya, Karen, and Joanne? It's 6 o'clock right now. We'd want to wrap up.
Just want to thank everyone for coming. You've asked some really great questions and given us some food for thought. The voter engagement community, some food for thought, and some things to work on to enhance the moderator program. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Good night. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.